Ever stood under a sky so wide your secrets felt small? We ride the stories of the West. Campfire truths, trail dust, memories, saloon whispers. Gritty humans, sometimes messy. Every tale is a horizon to chase. Subscribe, pull up a stool, and maybe find a little courage for your own frontier. The Blue Coyote Saloon in Silver Bend carried the smells of spilled beer and old smoke. A piano with two dead strings fought a three-note tune, while boots kept time on a floor rubbed gray by grit. Lantern light shook on the rafters. Cards snapped. Laughter came loose and mean. The room worked like a single creature that knew only appetite. Eamon Pike climbed a small crate and slapped a ledger open with 3 fingers that still wore coal dust in the lines. He cleared his throat until the piano died. Voices dipped. Chairs creaked. A shape shifted in the crowd, tall and long, in a weathered duster hat brim low. Eyes the color of cold ash. Cole Mercer set his back to a post, like he had done it 1,000 times, one heel parked on a rail, one hand quiet on nothing at all. 2 men dragged the girl up. Rope ringed both wrists. Her hair hung in clotted ropes across her cheek. Dirt made a mask of her face, but her eyes showed raw and steady the way a lake shows the sky on a windless day. The rope had chewed her skin. Little beads of red sat in the grooves. She did not look at the crowd. She watched the floor, then the door, then nothing. Pike spoke like a carnival man who knew a crowd. Vagrant picked up near the claims, strong enough to work. Mouth closed. No family worth noting. He turned her once by the elbow so they could see her from every side. A few men whistled. Sheriff Royce Bell stood by the bar with a tin star that ached for oil. He rolled the edge of it under his thumb and watched the whiskey in his glass as if it might say a prayer. He did not meet the girl's eyes. Jeb Crowder leaned against a pillar with a grin too white for this town. He played a little game with a brass lighter, flipping it open shut, open shut. The case-caught lamplight threw a mean gleam, and when the lid snapped open there was an engraving tight and sharp. Crane Consolidated. The C bit deep into the metal like it had teeth. Pike called out numbers. 10, 11, 12. A man with a split ear laughed and held up 2 fingers like a peace sign meant for no one. The piano player tried to make a joke, but found the silence had gone strange. 15, Pike said, hearing his own voice rise with the room. 17, 20. Cole dipped a hand into his coat and set a coin on the bar. A silver dollar, one edge shaved by years of friction, glowed dull as a clouded moon. He pushed it into the light, slow, and it made a sound that cut across the room, a clean ring that did not belong to wood or breath or the scrape of chair legs. He did not look at anyone. He said, 50. That number hit like a slap. The saloon paused in its own throat. Pike's mouth stayed open too long. The sheriff sipped and blinked. Jeb let the lighter close without flame once, twice, crawling his smile back over his teeth. The girl kept her head down, but something inside the posture changed the way a branch carries different weight the moment the wind shifts. Sold, Pike tried to say like it was nothing. Sold, he did say, his voice finding its level. He wrote something that did not matter into his ledger with a stubbed pencil. He waved the 2 men in. They pulled her down the steps toward Cole. Her boots scuffed. The rope jerked at her wrists, lifted them so her shoulders tilted. She did not try to slow them down. Her breath came in short takes that warmed the cold air, then vanished. When she reached him, she finally raised her eyes. They were emptier than he had expected, and more awake than anyone wanted. She said soft enough to live only between them, "You paid for me, now do it." Cole's eyes moved once to Sheriff Bell. The star in the man's palm flashed, then disappeared. The sheriff found the bottom of his glass. Cole looked back at the girl. He bent, drew a narrow knife from the top of his boot, and set the blade against rope. The rope was cheap and hard. It yielded with a frayed sigh. Fibers let go. The knife slid once more clean, and the circle of rope fell against her skirt and died there. He put the knife away. He did it without drama. He said, "You are free." A small noise rose from the crowd. Not surprise and not anger, something in the middle. The piano player reached to start a song, caught himself, put his hands in his lap. Jeb Crowder flicked the lighter open with a snap that sounded like a finger bone. He lit nothing. He exhaled through his nose and watched the girl like a dog eyes meat it is not sure it deserves. She drew her hands back as if they did not know what to do. The skin at her wrists was raw and bright. She breathed on the marks as though warmth could erase them. She did not say thank you. She did not move away. She stood there in the coat of shadows that gathered around Cole and tasted the air like a traveler smelling rain over a dry river. Cole took his duster off and set it around her shoulders. It hung heavy. She flinched when the cloth touched her neck, then went still. The coat swallowed the thinness of her frame and made her look like a child who had put on a father's clothes for a game that had gone wrong. She put one hand inside the coat and held it closed at the throat. Her fingers shook once, then they stopped. Pike tried to laugh. Business concluded, folks. The room eased in tiny ways. A stack of chips clattered as someone remembered to rake them. A bottle kissed the counter. Men looked at one another and practiced forgetting. The sheriff rotated his glass 1/4 turn so the rim faced the door. He still did not look at Cole. On the back wall, a poster hung crooked for the crane mine. A worker with his sleeves rolled was drawn to look like a hero. The paper had a scorch at one corner, as if someone had tested flame on it and thought better. The scorch made a small black tongue that pointed at nothing. Cole turned. His coat on her shoulders tugged her with the movement. He made no apology. He did not take her arm. He stepped forward and the door grew nearer, panes fogged by human heat. The crowd parted without looking like they did. Men kept their eyes on their hands, on their cards, on a patch of floor that had once been blood. Halfway to the door, a rumor traveled across the tables. Silas Crane will not like this. It moved like wind shifts a curtain. No one owned it. No one said it loud. They reached the threshold. The door was 2 plates of wood with a half-moon window. Cole pushed one side and a denim cold slipped around them. Outside, the street was dust, with a thin crust of frost. A dog under the steps barked twice, and then lay its head back down on its tail. The wind carried the sweet medicinal smell of creosote from fences that had given up on staying straight. Behind them, Jeb snapped the lighter open and let flame jump. It was small, a blue at the base, and a steady orange that tried to be brave. The brass lid dropped shut. The flame died as if it had never been asked to work at all. Cole put his hat back on. He did not offer the girl his hand. He walked into the street, and he did not look back. She took one step, then another, the coat dragging the boards of the porch, then whispering across the street dust. Her boots did not fit right. They slapped at her heels as she moved. She looked once to her left at the dark mouth of an alley, then kept to the open. The sky over Silver Bend had the color of old iron. The first star had not yet decided to show. Lamps along the far side of the street bled yellow. Farther out, a pump handle beat a slow rhythm and quit. The sounds sat on the air like tools laid on a bench. A horse in a side lot knocked its bucket over and cursed in a throat only horses own. Cole's horse waited tied to a rail. The animal flicked one ear, then the other, then went still when Cole came near. Cole took the knot in his hand and loosened it. He looked back once at the saloon window. The glass held their shapes for a heartbeat, 2 dark figures, and the smear of a lantern behind them, then only showed the world on the other side. He set a palm to the horse's neck and felt warmth under hair and skin, a solid heat that did not ask questions. He lifted the duster at the girl's shoulder just enough to free her hands. She kept them low and near her sides. He did not touch her skin. He did not say her name. He did not have it. She did not offer it. Wind ran up the street and tugged at the hem of the coat. For a second it showed a length of ribbon tied in her hair. The end of it blackened like it had lived too close to fire. He set a canteen on the rail and tipped it so she could drink. She took it without looking at him. She swallowed once, twice. On the third swallow, her hands steadied. She handed the canteen back and wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist. She kept her eyes on the horse's shoulder, on the rise and fall, on a rhythm that did not belong to coin or rope or speech. Cole looked once more at the door of the Blue Coyote. Music tried twice to start and failed. He put the canteen away. He made a choice quiet as air collects in a room. He took 2 steps into the street. She took 2 steps with him. The town breathed and let them pass. The street let them go without a word. The town fell behind in a hush that tasted of ash and lamp oil. Cole set his hand to the horse's neck and felt the animal breathe. He loosened the rail knot with 2 turns of his wrist and stepped aside. The girl lifted the coat with one hand so her knees could find the stirrup. She did not ask for help. She did not reach for him. She climbed like a person who had learned to save her weight for the last inch. The saddle leather spoke in small creaks. The horse shifted once, then settled. Cole took the reins and walked them out through the ruts. The boards of the porch hollowed their steps and then were gone. The dog under the stairs looked up, decided the night had more to say than it did, and slept again. They cleared the last lamp, and the dark came close. The sky held a thin powdering of stars that grew as their eyes adjusted. Cold scraped at the throat. Somewhere beyond the lots, a pump handle tried to find a rhythm and gave up. Cole swung up into the saddle. He kept his weight easy so the horse would forgive the extra person. He felt the shift behind him when she found her balance. She did not grab for him. She hooked her fingers in the edge of the coat and pressed her forearms to her ribs. After a time, the horse picked a steady trot that sounded like a watch in a quiet room. They left the riverbed road and took the line along the mesquite. The trees huddled low silver on their thorns where the starlight found them. A coyote called from the flats, and another answered across a dry wash. The wind changed and brought the clean, sharp smell of creosote from old fence posts. The girl stiffened. It was a small thing, a seam pulled too tight. Cole felt it without turning his head. He said, "There is water in the canteen." She made no sound. When he tipped the canteen back 1 inch, she took it. Metal touched teeth and clicked. She drank twice and stopped. Breath held. He waited. She lifted the canteen again and gave it back with more in it than he had expected. He said nothing. The horse blew through its nose and shook a fly that did not exist. The town's glow drained away until only the stars had a say. The road went from 2 grooves to 1, then to suggestions, then to the memory of a way. Cole let the horse choose the shallow crossings. Green fireflies lit low places where water had once stood. They passed a stand of ocotillo with thorn tassels that looked like dead candles. The girl's breathing found a rhythm that matched the horse. She rested the heel of one hand lightly on the back of the saddle and left it there not for safety, only to know where the line was. They came to the gate at Mesquite Flats when the cold had begun to feel personal. The gate was nothing more than 2 posts and a crossbar and a length of rope that had learned one knot so well it did not want another. Cole swung down. He cupped the knot, turned it once, pulled the standing line, and the gate gave up its hold. The rope fell soft against the post. He pushed the gate with his hip, and it went wide wood, sighing against sand. The girl watched his hands. Her face in the starlight was a pattern of plains and shadow, the dirt on her skin gone gray. Cole waited for the horse to pass and pulled the gate shut. He tied the rope again, the same knot, quick and neat. He spoke like he was naming the parts of a thing to himself. Bowline, holds under pull, releases when you tell it to. She looked at the knot and touched the rough line with 2 fingers. She did not answer. The windmill by the house turned once and ticked, then again, then stopped. The tower was a black outline against a colder black. Beyond it, the house kept its light to itself. The yard smelled of dry wood and the old sweet of hay. Cole slid the saddle and blanket and set them over the rail. He rubbed the horse's withers with the flat of his palm until the skin warmed under hair. He fed it a measure from the bin and listened to the slow crush of teeth. The girl stood just inside the circle of the yard, the coat hanging heavy enough to quiet most of her shivers. She held herself as if the dark had weight. The front door opened on a room that had learned to be several rooms at once. Table near the window, short stove with a coil of wood stacked on a crate, a bed pushed against the far wall. Hooks held tools and a coat that had seen low rain years. Cole set a lamp to a match and turned the wick until the flame pulled in steady and clean. Light touched the undersides of things. The room looked back the way rooms do when they have no opinion. He gave her the bed with a nod and crossed to the stove. He set a small pot to heat added beans and a little salt from a jar and the end of an onion that had waited in a bowl of its own. He put a pan on and laid 2 pieces of bread to warm until one side took a thin brown. He filled a tin cup. He set the cup and the bread on the table and stood away so she would not have to reach past him. She came as far as the chair nearest the door. She did not sit with her back to it. She turned the chair. She made sure the latch was close to her shoulder. Her eyes moved across the window, across the corners, across the shadow that belonged to the stove. She took the cup in both hands and drank, and left a swallow. She picked up the bread and looked at it for a second, as if it had asked for a promise, then ate without hurry. Cole took the knife from his boot and set it on the shelf by the stove, where his hand could find it without looking. He drew the pistol and wiped the mouth of the barrel with a clean rag, and laid it on the table open, the cylinder empty, the cartridges in a neat row. He reloaded with patience. The sound of each cartridge seating in its chamber was small and round. He pushed the pistol back in leather. He said the door locks from the inside. Her eyes went to the latch. She tried it. The click was honest. She nodded once. "There is another blanket in the trunk," he said. She did not answer. She had finished the bread and the beans, and she kept her hands wrapped around the cup as if water made heat on its own. The skin at her wrists had begun to bruise where the rope had tracked. She turned one wrist over and then the other, like a person learning a new shape had happened to them in the last hour. She tugged the coat a little closer at the throat. Cole stoked the stove. The embers woke with a hush that made the lamp seem loud. He left the stove door open a finger's width. The light in the room thickened to a comfort that was not yet trust. He took the chair by the window and tilted it until he could see the yard. He let his breath slow. He listened for the windmill. He listened for the horse. He listened for the kind of silence that means trouble, and heard only the other kind. The girl put the cup down without a sound and pulled the blanket from the trunk. She spread it over the bed and stood for a moment with her hands on the bed frame, as if the wood could steady her. She did not lie down. She sat. Her boots stayed on. Her gaze went to the crack along the window sash where the night lives even when doors are closed. The coat slid off one shoulder, and she pulled it back up again. When the window rattled, she flinched, then went still. The wind touched the room and left. Cole kept his eyes on the yard. He was not asleep. She knew it. She lowered onto the bed carefully, like someone lowering a wounded bird to a table, so as not to scare it into breaking itself. Her breathing changed, not deeper, only less sharp. Cole turned the lamp wick until the light thinned and held there. The stove kept its glow. The windmill ticked once and was quiet. The knot at the front gate held. The rope waited for a hand to tell it what to do. Morning arrived like a soft bruise across the horizon. The first light found the windmill and turned it silver for a breath. Frost held to the short grass until the sun learned its step. The house kept quiet. The stove gave one settled pop. Cole woke when the yard did. He sat up in the chair, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and listened. The horse shifted in the pen. A bird in the mesquite tried 2 notes and then a third. Inside the room, the girl turned on the bed, and the rope marks on her wrist scraped cloth. He stood and set the lamp wick to nothing. He stirred the stove, laid 2 splits, and closed the door until the iron hummed. He stepped out into air that bit the teeth. At the fence, he hung a blue enamel cup on a post cap and filled it from the canteen. The water caught a thread of light and made it look clean. He left the cup there and went to the pump. The handle fought him, then gave. He worked it until the bucket took weight. He carried the bucket to the trough and poured. The water smoked in the cold and then settled to glass. When he came back, she was in the doorway, with the coat tight around her shoulders. Her boots made no sound. Her eyes were caught on the yard, as if she had never seen open space this close. She looked smaller, without the dark around her. She saw the cup on the post and went to it. She held it in both hands and drank. She did not empty it. She set it back with the handle facing the yard. Cole said, "There is bread in the pantry, jerky on the peg." She nodded. She did not turn her back to the yard, even for that. She edged into the kitchen space, tore a piece of bread, and ate standing. When she chewed her jaw, shook once and then steadied. He did not watch her do it. He oiled the hinges on the door with a cloth, testing the swing until it made peace with silence. By the time the sun broke the first fence board, the yard had its chores laid out. Cole moved through them with the rhythm built by years. He forked hay. He checked the hooves and found a stone and teased it free. He paced the fence line and pressed his palm to each post. The ones that leaned, he wedged true with a rock. At the west corner, he found a stretch of barbed wire that had gone slack. He rolled it up on a palm, felt the pricks find old scars, and fixed the staple with the hammer he kept in a boot scabbard. The girl kept near, but not close. When he carried a bucket, she took the next one without being told and mirrored his path. When he reached for a plank, she had an arm under one end before he could speak. She carried her weight low like a sprinter poised before a gun. Twice the wind gave a scent of creosote, and twice she went rigid until it passed. Her eyes never stayed in one place long. Door, yard, fence, road, door again. At the shed she paused. A paper hung nailed to the wall, a flyer from the Crane Consolidated mine that had once been white. A man with rolled sleeves smiled with clean teeth and held a pick like a flag. The bottom corner wore a burn dark as a small tongue. She reached up and set 2 fingers on the burn and pulled them away quick as if it still might have heat. She looked at Cole. He looked at the flyer and then at the nailhead and said nothing. He took a coil of rope off a peg and set it on a shelf where it did not belong. She understood that he had moved something that did not need moving. She found a small box on a high shelf by feel. Inside was a mouth harp scuffed and dented. She turned it over in her palm. She did not bring it to her lips. She slipped it into the coat pocket, like a person tucks away a match they might want later. They worked into mid-morning. The sun burned the frost off the north side of the posts, and the ground sighed with the change. Dust made faint halos around boots. A hawk cut a clean line across the pasture and took that line to a dead tree and sat. Cole showed her where the rain barrel leaked and had her hold her palm under while he packed oakum in the seam. He passed her the hammer. She kept the head square and the nails went true. He said, "Good." She did not answer, but her mouth changed in a way that was not a smile and not its opposite. He left the pistol on the kitchen table while he carried a bale in. She saw it then, the crack in the grip that ran like a dry river from frame to butt. Her eyes rested on it as on a scar on a face. She did not touch it. She turned and set her hands in the wash basin and scrubbed the dirt from her knuckles until the water took on the color of slate. The cuts at her wrists smarted, and she had to stop. She held them under the draft from the pump. The skin went pink and then calmer. By noon, the light pressed down. He set a pan on the stove and fried 2 eggs and a spoon of lard. He slid one to her on a tin plate with a pinch of salt. She reached with both hands, sat in the chair she had chosen before, and ate slow. The smell of hot fat filled the room and made the wood smell warmer. Dust motes rose from the floorboards and turned in the light like small things with nowhere better to be. They did not talk much. When they did, it sounded like work talking to work. She said, "Do you get many people here?" He said no. She looked at the door latch, then at the window sash. She said, "The wind is loud." He said, "It is louder when you do not expect it." She nodded. She took the crusts of bread and set them aside. She watched his hands as he cut twine and closed a cabinet. She watched his hands as if they were a map. In the afternoon, he took a line of fence that wanted mending, and she walked with him carrying the small tools. He set a post in a hole where a post had given in to rot. He tamped Phil with the blunt end of the shovel and checked the plumb by eye. He tied a length of rope between the new post and the next and pulled until it sang. He set a plain knot that made a loop that did not slip. She watched the turns. He did not explain the knot. She did not ask. The rope held like a promise made without words. Cloud shade crossed once short and cool. The windmill found a steady turn and began to talk. The sound had a hollow, patient tone like a hymn sung by one voice. The horse dozed with its lower lip loose. A blue jay scolded them and went about its business. A grasshopper climbed a pant leg and got bored and hopped off again. Near evening, the light softened and took a gold that made dust beautiful. Cole fished the silver dollar from his pocket and set it on the fence post without looking at it. It caught the sky and made its own small sun. The girl looked at the coin like it might bite. He left it there until the sun kissed the ridge, and then he palmed it and put it away. He did not count what it had done or not done. He brought the blue enamel cup back to the post for the night water and filled it halfway so it would not ice. He stood there for a long moment, eyes on the gate. The rope knot held and would hold. The yard smelled of dry earth and the last of the day's heat lifting out of wood. From the shed came the faint resin scent of old pine. Inside the house, the stove ticked as the iron moved and settled. She hovered in the doorway again. She had taken off the coat while she swept the floor, and there was a length of ribbon in her hair, the end black as a coal, that never died. She touched it once, gentle, as if to remind it to stay. She looked at him, not long then, past him to the line of fence that now ran true. Her shoulders eased a 1/4 inch. It was enough to see if you were looking for it. He said, "There is coffee if you like it bitter." She said yes. He poured into the cup that had the smallest chip on its rim and handed it to her. She warmed her hands on it and took one careful sip and said nothing more. He closed the door softly behind them and set the bar. Night would come the way night comes here, from the edges first, and then all at once. The stove gave a small glow. The windmill turned twice and fell quiet. The house took the shape of 2 people who knew how to work beside each other and not talk about it. Night settled thick and close, and the house held its breath. The stove kept a small red at the back of its throat. The windmill ticked once and stopped. Cole sat near the window with his boots flat and his hat brim low. The girl lay on the bed with the blanket to her shoulders and the coat pulled close at the throat. Her boots were still on. The room learned the sound of their breathing and tried to keep it. A scent came in from the yard, thin at first, then wider. Wet dust, cold iron. Far off, the sky rolled on itself. The first thunder did not speak so much as clear its throat. The window sash trembled. The sound found the girl where she lay and turned something inside her. Her hands locked at the blanket. Her breath broke. A small sound escaped her, not a word more, like an animal that has decided not to cry and cannot help itself. The second thunder cracked open. Rain arrived in hard coins hitting the roof, the window, the yard. The house answered with a shiver. She sat up so fast the blanket fell. Her eyes were open and not here. She was already standing by the time Cole rose. He did not touch her. He moved to the stove and put the kettle on and turned the wick up a hair until the flame kept steady. The light laid a clean line along the edge of the table. He spoke from there low. "You are inside." She looked at the window. Her chest went quick. Her fingers found her wrists and gripped the raw places until the skin around them blanched. She pressed her back to the wall. Her gaze hunted corners and found nothing that would change. The rain gained strength and ran in sheets that made the yard a mirror. The windmill took a few turns and complained, then yielded. Her first words were to the window, not to him. They burned it. Cole stood still. The kettle began to think about singing. The girl swallowed and tried again. They burned it. Our place. They said Eli pulled ore from where he should not. They said we hid it in the stove box. They came at dark. I was cutting bread and the knife went stupid in my hand because I smelled the oil first. The men had helmets with a letter on the front. The letter caught the lamplight like a tooth. They laughed. One kicked the door. Eli stood up so fast his chair fell hard enough to make my ears ring. He was still talking when the first bottle came through the window. The curtains knew what to do. They climbed to the ceiling, and the beams learned their names, and then the whole room was all breath and light. Her voice caught and broke again. She did not try to stop it now. She rode it like a rider who knows the horse will shake. Eli pulled me to the floor and covered me with his body. He said, "Run." He said it like he wanted it to be easy. The men stood in the doorway and watched their own work. One of them wore steel on his boots and the toe was bright. The sheriff stood on the road. He had the star in his hand and not on his chest. I saw it flash when the fire breathed big. He looked away from the door. He looked at the sky and said nothing, like he was waiting for a storm to make up his mind for him. They told Eli to bring the ore out. He said there was no ore. He said it twice and took the third time. When he tried to stand, someone put a hand on his shoulder and pushed him back down and smiled with teeth like a clean knife. The kettle began to sing. Cole took it off the heat and set it down to hush. He poured a tin cup half full and brought it to the table and left it there. He did not set it in her hand. He spoke without looking away from her. "Who said it? Who owns those men?" She blinked like a person waking up from a drop. Her eyes found him and held him like a ledge. Her voice came softer and sharper at once. Silas Crane. Rain clawed at the roof. The stove light made a little river in the blade of the knife on the shelf. Cole looked at her wrists. The rope marks had purples now, along the edges. He set a clean cloth on the table. He pushed the cup 1 inch closer. She came off the wall like someone expecting a blow and not finding one. She took the cup and held it with both hands and did not drink. Steam found her face and fogged her lashes. She closed her eyes and drew the heat in and let the rest fall. Her voice steadied enough for the story to hold weight. They threw a can over the threshold, and the oil slurred itself across the floorboards. Eli got me to the back door. The latch stuck because the wood had swollen in the last storm, and he had not planed it yet. He put his shoulder to it, and the hinge screamed and then gave. I ran. I reached the mesquite and turned because I wanted to see him behind me, and I wanted to see him cough and curse and then come. He did not come because the roof found its knees and went down. The men laughed. The sheriff put his star in his pocket. There was a wagon in the road with a man in the seat. He had a cigar that made a smell I cannot forget. He lit it with a brass lighter. It had letters on it. He smiled when the flame took. He did not look at the door. He looked at the smoke like he was looking at a map. I put my face in the dirt, and I bit the skin at my wrist so I would not make a sound a man could use. She held the cup to her mouth and took one drink and another. She placed it on the table with care. Her hands shook. She put one palm flat and made it stop. When the wagon jolted and the cigar ash fell, the lighter slipped off his knee and went to the ground. No one saw. They were busy with the light. I went down on my knees in the mesquite and my dress tore, and the thorns went in, and still I crawled and took it. It burned my fingers a little. I did not drop it. I put it in my pocket. I lay there and held it while the roof fell. When it was quiet, I kept holding it because it had weight, and the weight told me I was still here. She reached into the coat pocket now and brought out a brass lighter. The case carried a life of scratches. Along one side, a pair of letters had been cut with a mind that loved itself. S and C tight, clean deep. She set it on the table. Cole did not touch it. She pushed it with the tip of her finger until it rested by his hand. I kept it. I do not know why I kept it. Maybe because sometimes I wake up and think, I do not have anything that proves I was anywhere. This proves something. It proves their hands were on my floor. Cole put his thumb to the lid and felt the little spring push back. The lid went up, and the wheel turned under his finger, and the flint threw a stubborn spark, and then a flame that held steady, small, and faithful. The flame made the S and the C shine like two eyes in a night face. He closed the lid, and the room exhaled. He set the lighter down and looked at the door, then at the window, then at the gate in his head. Who else was there? Men from the mine. Jeb Crowder. He plays with fire to keep his hands from looking empty. He flicked a lighter, then two. His had the same letters. He likes the click. The sheriff. He stood where a man stands when he wants to see and not be seen. The others I did not know, but they wore the mine on their hats. Cole nodded once. He went to the cabinet in the corner and took out a narrow box and set it on the table. He opened it and counted cartridges without speaking. He put 6 in one pocket and 6 in another. He checked the cylinder and the oil in the works. He closed the box and slid it back. He kept his movements clean and slow, the way a person keeps peace with an animal that could hurt. He lifted the pistol from the table, weighed it in his palm, and put it in leather. He looked at the lighter again and picked it up and slipped it into the breast pocket of his coat. The storm beat harder and then began to soften. The roof pattered instead of roared. The stove huffed and settled. The kettle had forgotten its song. The girl stood with her hands on the table edge and watched his hands do their work. Her face had gone still, not calm, just still. The ribbon in her hair had loosened, and the blackened end brushed her shoulder. Cole took a cloth and set it on the table by her wrists. He poured a little water and dipped the cloth and wrung it until it did not drip. He held it out. She hesitated. She took it. She pressed it to the skin and hissed once at the sting. He looked away to give that sound privacy. He went to the window and eased 2 fingers into the gap at the sash and felt the damp. He drew them back and rubbed the water into his thumb like oil. He said, "Sleep if you can." She sat back on the edge of the bed, as if the wood could make decisions for her. She kept the cloth to her wrists. She watched the door latch and then the knot in the grain above it, and then his hands when he set another split in the stove. The flame found it and moved along the fibers and made a sound like quiet clapping. She lay down without letting go of the cloth. Her eyes closed and opened. She spoke toward the ceiling. He did not steal ore. Eli, he did not. He would not know how. He would have brought it to the office like they told him to. He would have believed a desk could count fair. He would have believed a ledger is a promise. Cole did not answer. He moved the chair back to the place by the window. He sat. The house let the storm finish. The windmill turned sometimes and sometimes not. The yard smelled of wet earth and creosote washed clean. Somewhere far off, a coyote objected and then forgot what it had meant to say. He took his hat off and set it on the chair back. He put his hands on his knees. He looked at the lighter through the coat that now held it. He did not look at the clock because the house did not have one. He looked at the dark and at the way the gate rope had been tied and at the hill line he knew by heart, though he could not see it. He blinked once in the slow way that tells a body it is still here. Morning, he said. Morning took the rain smell and left the sky a thin blue. The yard held puddles that remembered the night for a breath and then sank into soil. Cole stood from the chair with the slow care of a man who had measured his bones. He put the hat on and drew the coat close. The lighter in the pocket found its place against his ribs as if it had always known it. She sat on the edge of the bed holding the damp cloth to her wrists. Her eyes were open. The skin there had gone the color of plums and old violets. When he moved toward the door, she stood. She set the cloth down and the water made a round mark on the table that looked like a coin and broke its edge as it dried. He unbarred the door. The hinge had learned the oil and made no complaint. Cold air came in with a clean bite. The windmill gave a single turn that clicked like a tongue against teeth. He stepped out and went to the shed without looking at her. She followed to the threshold and stayed there, one hand on the post like a person feeling for a pulse. He saddled the horse with a calm that made the work smaller. Blanket first, then the leather. The cinch strap slid and waited. He checked the latigo and drew it through the ring and pulled until the saddle accepted the horse. He did not yank. He did not hurry. He checked the bridle, the bit, the worn places in the reins where wet had stiffened the leather to a memory. His hands had their own memory and worked without asking. She crossed the yard in 3 steps that were not long and not short. Her boots left small scallops in the damp dust. She stood at the rail close enough to see the notch in the buckle, far enough to move quick if the horse took a mind. Her voice came even and flat. "If you go, they kill you." He looked up. The words found him and did not move him. His mouth worked once, not quite a smile, and not anything like it. He checked the girth again and let the strap breathe and then drew it snug a last time. He said, "Living like this takes more from you." She shook her head. Her hand found the ribbon in her hair. She did not pull it tight. She let her fingers rest on the blackened end and left them there. He went back to the house for the rifle and did not take it. He took cartridges instead. He counted them into his palm and into his pocket and listened to the small weight change in the coat. He closed the cupboard. On the shelf above it, a cracked mirror waited in a frame that had seen too much sun. He slid the mirror from its nails and set it on the table. He took his pocket knife and pressed the back of the blade along the crack and worked it until a shard came free with a sound like thin ice giving. He wrapped the shard in a square of cloth and put it in his other pocket. He set the mirror back less than it had been and still enough for a face. She watched and did not ask. She stood with her shoulder against the door and looked small the way a drawn line looks small on a big page and still matters. Cole filled the canteen and shook it to hear the slosh. He took 2 cups from the shelf and set one on the table rim side down and left it. He took the other and drank and let the water leave his mouth like it knew where it needed to go. He wiped his mouth on the back of his hand and saw the knot in the wood of the door. He had always liked that knot. It looked like an eye closed on a secret. He came back to the yard. The horse stamped once and leaned its weight to the good leg. Cole put a palm on the neck and felt heat and hide. He set the stirrup. He turned to the gate. The rope there held a bowline that he had tied in the dark for years. He put his fingers to it and felt it hold. He did not untie it. He just checked that it knew its job. She stepped between him and the gate, not a full block, just enough to be seen. She did not lift her chin. She did not plead. She said one thing that had edge and shape. If you go, do not let him smile. Cole nodded once. He did not say he would not. He did not say he would. He looked at the saloon coin scratch on the silver dollar still in his pocket. He put a hand to it and then took his hand away. He went to the barn and took a single clean bandana from a nail and folded it. He wrapped it around his left shoulder where the coat would pull if he had to reach. He tied it with a square knot, small and sure. He rolled each shoulder until the cloth found its comfort. She had moved to the rail by then. She lifted the saddlebag and held it while he opened the flap and set in what he chose. A tin of grease, a rag, a short length of rawhide. The lighter never left the coat. The shard slept in its cloth. She handed him the strap and he buckled it. Her fingers were steady now. The bruises at her wrists sat like a map of last night. He said, "Coffee helps if your hands forget what to do." She said, "I will sweep." They both knew that meant she would watch the road as much as the floor. He took the reins. He touched the brim of his hat, not as farewell, but as the way a head bows to a task. He put his boot in the stirrup and seated himself high. The horse took his weight and squared itself to the day. He did not crowd the bit. He let the animal pick the first steps. She came to the gate and took the rope in both hands. She loosened the bowline without looking at it. The knot came clean as if it liked being asked by her. She swung the gate wide. He rode through. He turned the horse with a knee and kept his eyes on the road long enough to see what empty looked like. He looked back once and only at her hands. "Tie it," he said. She tied it. Not the same knot he had used. Her first try made a tangle that would hold a moment and fail. She undid it and set her fingers slower. She made a loop and led the line through and around and back through. It held. She pulled and the knot did what it should. "Good," he said. She stepped back and rested her palms against the gate rail, and the wood left a pale on her skin that would be gone before noon. The ribbon in her hair had slipped again. It touched her shoulder like smoke. She did not fix it. She watched him with a face that had learned how not to show more than it wanted to. Cole put the horse to an easy lope along the fence line. The land took him the way a big animal takes a rider when it is used to being carried. Mesquite drew a line low and gray. The wind had given up the wet and gone to its dry self. Every few yards he let the reins fall a little, and the horse lowered its head and breathed dust and lifted again. He looked once over his shoulder and saw the yard as 3 shapes: house and shed and windmill drawn against light. A thread of smoke rose from the stovepipe and did not waver. He reached the turn where the flat swing toward the road to town. He slowed the horse and looked at the sky without reading it. He touched the place in his coat where the lighter rode. He touched the pocket where the shard sat. He felt the pull of both pockets and knew exactly how much each weighed. He moved on. Back at the house, she cleaned the table with a cloth and changed the water in the basin and set the blue enamel cup on the fence post. She swept the floor, not to make it pretty, but to give her hands a job that did not shake. The broom bristles made a soft hiss over the boards. She stopped once to listen to a sound she thought she heard. It was nothing. It was the wind working the ribbon ends on the edge of the flyer out at the shed. She closed the door and set the bar without looking down. On the road, a jackrabbit broke from the brush and ran parallel to the horse for a dozen bounds, and then turned into its own dust and was gone. Cole watched it go and did not think of meaning. He rode at a pace that was not slow and not urgent. In the distance, the earth lifted where the town would be. The sun climbed in a straight line. The saddle leather warmed and gave a smell that sits in the mind. The day opened its hands and did not offer anything and did not take anything back. Silver Bend sat under a high white sun that made the world look skinned and clean. Cole rode in at a walk. The horse placed its feet with the care of an animal that knows streets can lie. Storefronts stared with windows that reflected daylight like they had made it. A woman swept her stoop and did not lift her eyes. Two boys paused over marbles and let their game die. The blacksmith's hammer fell once and then waited. The town had its hearing sharp. Cole tied the horse at the rail outside the Blue Coyote. He set the knot without looking and tested it with a tug. The lighter in his coat pressed metal against bone. He could feel the mirror shard in the pocket on the other side. He put his palm to the horse's neck and felt heat and calm. Then he climbed the steps and went in. The saloon kept the night smell even at noon. Beer gone flat, smoke gone stale, a floor rubbed smooth by souls. Lanterns hung cold and caught dust in their glass like flies in amber. Cards lay in a loose fan on two tables, forgotten mid-hand. May Delaney stood behind the bar with a towel that had learned the shape of her hand. Her hair was pinned close. Her eyes tracked him without moving. She set the towel down and reached for a bottle she did not pour from. Sheriff Royce Bell sat near the far end with his chair tilted just short of a fall. His tin star sat on his vest today instead of in his hand. He rolled an empty glass in his palm. The sunlight from the high window cut a sharp line across his jaw. He did not rise. He did not nod. He watched the space between Cole and the door as if that space might do a trick. A few men leaned at the rail and breathed like cattle in warm shade. Jeb Crowder was not among them. His laugh was not in the room, and the room kept the absence like a relief it did not dare admit. Cole walked to the bar and rested two fingers on the wood. May held his gaze a heartbeat longer than polite. He took the lighter from his coat and set it on the bar top. The brass looked old and mean. The letters S and C bit light out of the room. May's face did not change, but the skin at her throat learned a line. She said soft as if she had a small voice to spare. "That does not belong to you." "It belonged to my floor," Cole said. "A girl's floor. She kept it because it was heavy." May drew the lighter toward her with the edge of the towel. She looked at it as if it might bite. She opened the lid and spun the wheel once without striking. The flint whispered. She closed it and pushed it back until it came to rest where he had set it. "You sure you want the room to see that?" "They already did," Cole said. "They just did not look." From his chair, the sheriff said, "Mr. Mercer." Cole did not turn. "Sheriff." "The town is calm today," Bell said. "Let us keep it so." May slid a dry glass toward Cole and then stopped it with two fingers. "You here for whiskey or for something that burns longer?" Cole's mouth moved in a way that stood back from a smile. "All I need is the room set right." May's eyes flicked once to the mirror on the far wall. It was mounted above the upstairs rail, like a window that thought too well of itself. The glass had a slight ripple. It turned the room into something more honest and less pretty. She reached up and nudged the lamp behind the bar a degree. The reflection caught a curve of the upper landing and the mouth of the hallway that fed it. She set the lamp down with a sound so light it was more idea than noise. Cole took the cloth-wrapped shard from his pocket and placed it flat by his hand. He unfolded the cloth and let the light find the cut edge. May's gaze dipped and came back up. "You bring your own glass," she said. "Borrowed," Cole said, "like that lighter." She set her hands flat on the bar and leaned in a fraction. "You make a mess, you clean it." Cole nodded. "I brought a rag." Bell shifted in his chair so the leather made a small skin sound. "You think a saloon is a court," the sheriff said. "You like a room where people watch what you do." "I like a room where a man will have to stand up straight," Cole said. The sheriff's thumb brushed the star. "You like to make men stand up. I like to make them sit down." May poured water from a pitcher into a tin mug and set it on the bar near Cole's hand. "No charge," she said. "We are parched." Cole did not drink. He turned the mug half a turn until the handle faced the mirror. He set the shard so it leaned against the mug at a small angle no more than a breath. The shard took a thin piece of the room and bent it. Cole let his eyes go to the mirror above the rail. The mirror gave the upstairs hallway back to him in a narrow slice. He saw the shadow of a door frame and the promise of another. He saw a coil of rope left on a peg, and beside it hanging like a shrug that had made up its mind, a strip of cloth darkened at one end. May saw where he looked. Her jaw tightened once. "He likes trophies," she said, quiet enough for the bar to keep. Bell looked at Cole in the mirror rather than turning. If you have trouble with Mr. Crane, the sheriff said you can take it up where a desk sits. He tapped the star with his finger, as if it were a desk bell. This town keeps order. Cole did not answer. The lighter sat between his hand and May's. He touched it once with a knuckle and set it in the center of the bar, like a coin in a game that had a rule no one had written down. A man at the rail coughed and found his way to the door. Another got interested in the view from the window. A woman with a tray full of nothing crossed the room and set the tray down and did not pick it up again. The floor learned to hold quiet. May leaned to one side and looked past Cole to the hitch outside through the clean part of the window. "You rode alone," she said. "Yes." "You leave anyone waiting on the far side?" "Yes," he said. He did not elaborate. She did not push. The sheriff's glass tapped the table edge twice. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "I can have you leave." "You can try," Cole said. He did not say it as a dare. He said it like a man sets a tool down where it belongs. Bell stood the chair up on 4 legs and placed both boots on the floor. He did not stand. He let his hands rest open on the table. His eyes went to May and held there. May blinked once and looked away. She took a cloth from the rail and folded it in half and then in half again. She set it near the lighter. "You take that with you," she said to Cole without moving her mouth much. "I do not want it here when the wrong eyes walk in." "Whose eyes?" Cole said. May looked at the hallway that fed the upstairs. There are always eyes. From the street came the slow clop of a pair of horses that did not need to hurry for anyone. The sound turned the air in the room. The men at the rail found themselves with hands they did not know what to do with. Someone reached for cards and then decided not to remember the rules. The piano knew better than to try a note. Bell stood then. He pinned the star where it could be seen and let his coat fall open so the butt of his pistol showed clean. He adjusted the set of his hat with 2 fingers. He did not look toward the door. He looked at the floor in front of the bar as if telling it to hold still. Cole picked up the shard and tilted it until the edge of the mirror took the picture he wanted. The upstairs hall bent into view again. A shadow moved and stopped. Boots crossed once. A pair of spurs whispered against wood. Jeb Crowder's laugh skimmed the ceiling from beyond the corner of sight and fell apart before it could find a friend. He had found a perch in the blind of the landing. May's lamp on the back bar made a slender line that ran up the far wall and landed near the railing like a drawn measure. Cole set the shard back down without clink. May wiped a damp circle no one could see. She shifted a bottle by an inch so it gave the mirror back a brighter stripe. She did it with the care of a person straightening a picture in a house the day after a storm. Bell exhaled once. It was not nerves. It was patience looking for a chair. He moved 2 steps so his view of the doorway would be clear, but his path to the nearest pillar would be short. The men at the rail separated the way cattle will when a rider tracks straight. The room made a lane for whatever wanted it. The doors opened the way doors do when someone does not touch them hard. The light from outside slid across the floor, pure and white, then broke on a boot heel. Silas Crane came in with a coat that had not known dirt for long and a shirt that had not forgotten starch. He held a cigar where his hand liked it. He did not smoke it yet. His hair lay with money in it. His mouth had a shape that liked its work. He took in the room the way a man reads figures that are all in his favor. He saw Bell and nodded like a banker to a clerk. He saw May and let his eyes slow for a second out of habit and then speed up again. He saw Cole last and did not go soft or hard. He did not stop. He walked to the bar and set the cigar down without looking at where it landed. "Thirsty day," he said. May held the towel. "You look fit," she said. "I always do," Crane said. He turned his palm up in a small gesture that asked for a glass and respect. He got the glass. The respect he believed he already owned. Cole did not turn to face him full. He angled just enough to bring the man into the mirror and the shard. He could see Jeb shift on the landing and let his weight find a new creak. He could see the strip of cloth on the upstairs peg sway a breath as if a hand had remembered it and then left it alone. The cloth had a black edge that ate light. It had belonged in a different house on a different night. Crane pinched the cigar between thumb and finger and brought the lighter close the way he had taught his hands to do. He did not see that the lighter he reached for was not his hand's old friend, and yet it was. His fingers found the brass felt the letters and paused. The lid opened with the same click that had once owned a girl's floor. The flint sparked on the first try. Flame stood up and waited. Crane cupped the flame and looked at Cole over it. The flame laid a small gold along Crane's cheekbone. His eyes were the color of a wet coin. He smiled a little at nothing. He drew the cigar to the fire and did not make it glow. He let the flame go out on purpose and closed the lid with care. He set the lighter exactly where Cole had left it and put both hands on the bar as if it were a map and he knew all the places on it. "You bring souvenirs in here?" he said, still looking at the lighter. "That a thing we do now." Cole said, "I bring things back to where they were taken." Crane's mouth made a shape that stood just this side of amusement. He leaned a hip against the bar and put one elbow out so his coat opened to show a holster made by a man who knew leather. He did not move his feet. He let the room see he did not need to. Bell spoke without much voice. "Keep it quiet, gentlemen." May's eyes were on the upstairs rail. The mirror held Jeb's outline the way a pond holds a tree. She adjusted the lamp again only by breath. The bright stripe slid half an inch and set a line across the place where the landing turns. The line cut the shadow into two clean pieces. Crane reached and took his cigar back up. He rolled it between finger and thumb to feel its make. He smelled it as if the smell had ever told a truth. He did not light it. He looked at Cole and let his gaze rest as if it had found a chair it liked. "You made a purchase last night," he said. "You overpaid. It makes me wonder if you know the market." Cole said freedom is not a market. Crane laughed with only the front of his teeth. He looked at the sheriff and then back. "You talk like a churchman with dirt on his boots," he said. "You think words change wood." Cole's eyes did not leave the mirror and did not look like they were on it. In the glass he saw Jeb take the last step into the angle that would give him his shot if the room stayed as it was. Cole let his hand fall to the bar as if he were only tired. His fingers brushed the shard and turned it a hair. The shard caught the stripe May had drawn with her lamp and sent it to the landing post. Light climbed the post and found Jeb's sleeve and held. Jeb stilled. May wiped the same clean space again. Her breath came even. She did not look at Cole. The towel turned once in her hands and then stopped turning. Crane lifted the cigar like a toast to his own patience. He set it down again and ran his thumb along the lighter lid until the nail found the cut of the letters. He let his thumb rest there. His other hand stayed close to where his coat made a small hill that could be a weapon or a purse. He did not seem to care which everyone believed. The room breathed shallow. Outside, a wagon wheel hit a rut and rattled a brief song. Inside, dust motes climbed a sunshaft and hung. Cole took the water May had set in front of him and drank once. The glass made a small sound on the wood when he set it down. He looked at Crane like a man looks at a fence before he leans on it to see if it will take weight. Crane smiled as if someone had whispered something pleasant into his coat. "Let us call this a misunderstanding," he said. "You bring me what belongs to me, and I let you keep what you think belongs to you." The lighter sat between them bright and quiet. The mirror gave the room back with its secrets half erased and half underlined. The blue coyote waited, and the floor did not move. Silas Crane's fingers rested near the lighter, as if it were his nameplate. The room held the shape of his arrival. Chairs forgot to squeak. Cards remembered where they lay. The upstairs rail kept its quiet shadow. Cole let the glass and the shard do their work. The shard leaned against the tin mug at a whisper of an angle. It sent a thin blade of light to the landing post. The blade climbed the wood and kissed a sleeve where a man thought the dark would cover him. Jeb Crowder shifted and found that kiss on his arm. The sleeve took a slim line of brightness and told on him. His breath made a small rasp that did not belong to this room. He lifted the barrel slow, intent fixed like a needle. The gunmetal became a seal in the mirror, a black oval swallowing the strip of lamplight. Bell stood with his coat open hand near the butt he wore like a habit. He did not like the way the floor waited. May had the towel in her hands and held it like it could bless or punish. Her eyes flicked to the mirror and back. Her mouth made no sound. Crane spoke again with a voice that liked the taste of air. "Bring me what is mine," he said. "This does not have to cost you." Cole did not answer Crane. He talked to the room so that one man would move. "May," he said, "turn that lamp." May moved the lamp a degree. The stripe on the far wall slid like the second hand of a clock. It crossed the landing and climbed the banister. It painted Jeb's knuckles where he gripped the rail. The gun muzzle in the mirror lifted to the angle that would find the back of Cole's head. Cole's hand left the bar in a slow arc that looked like nothing but rest. His fingers found the pistol. The leather released as if it understood. Bell saw the lift and went for his own gun. Jeb took the shot he wanted. The world cracked. The first muzzle flash popped in the mirror like a small sun. Wood jumped from the rail where Jeb had braced his forearm. Cole fired as the mirrored light bloomed, sending his own shot toward the place the light had marked. His pistol barked once. Jeb's breath left as a wet sound that slid through the upstairs dark. A body hit the floorboards with a noise that lived between a thud and a drag. A heel scuffed. The rail shook and took his weight down the stairs 3 at a time. He landed on the main floor at a broken angle, eyes open and looking at nothing that would ever look back. Bell had his gun halfway up. Cole turned flat and fast and fired again. The shot caught the tin star and tore it from Bell's vest. The metal spun in the air with a bright whine and struck the wall. Bell's momentum died in a grunt. He slammed into a pillar shoulder, gone dead pistol slipping from his hand to thump the floor. He clutched at his chest glove, leaving a smear of powder on the fabric. Crane moved at the edge of Cole's eye, smooth as a man testing cloth. His coat opened wider, and the holster found his palm. Cole saw the draw coming, turned to meet it, and caught the pain as a claw across his left shoulder. The shot took flesh and heat. He did not fall. He rode the burn and let it settle where it had to live. His right hand was steady and thinking. He did not fire yet. Crane smiled because his body knew how. He took in the blood on the coat and let his lip tilt. He set the cigar back in his mouth and spoke around it like a man whose teeth never get in the way. "You feel that," he said with a softness that insulted pain. Cole reached across the bar and took the lighter. He thumbed the lid open and felt the spring push against his nail. He turned the wheel. The flint sparked with a stubborn shower and gave a flame that was small and clean. He raised it, cupped it, and brought it to Crane's cigar. The tobacco caught and glowed. Smoke rolled sweet and dirty into the space between their faces. Crane's eyes flicked from flame to man. Surprise came and had nowhere to sit. The cigar burned bright. Cole let the lid fall, and the flame died with a neat click. He set the lighter down exactly where Crane had placed it when he walked in. He could feel blood wet on his sleeve. He did not look at it. Crane's hand went to his gun again to finish what he had felt. Begin. Cole lifted the pistol and shot him center mass, close enough to smell the leather of Crane's belt, as the recoil pushed him back. Crane tried to breathe and met a wall. His mouth opened, and the cigar fell. It left a crescent of ash on the bar, and rolled once and stopped. Crane's fingers touched his vest as if he were looking for a pocket that could pay for this. He sank to his knees with care like a gentleman who does not want to offend the floor, and then his knees failed, and he went to his side. The room made a sound that was half air leaving and half glass learning to break. A bottle slid off a shelf and shattered. Someone shouted a prayer without words. Someone else swallowed one. May's towel hit the bar and stayed there. Her face emptied out, then filled with something hard and quiet. She stepped around the end of the bar and crossed to the doors and pushed them until the light narrowed. She pulled the bolt. The saloon became itself in a smaller way. Bell sat with his back against the pillar, eyes on the pistol that had gotten away from him. He worked his fingers and found pain that told him he could still use his hand later. He looked at Cole the way a man looks at a fire he did not start and cannot put out. He did not stand. The star lay near his left boot, dented and no longer a shape you would wear. Jeb made a noise that tried to be a word and failed. Blood spread under his jaw and grew a skin that shivered every time he tried to breathe. His boots made a slow knock against one another that had no rhythm. Then the boots learned stillness. Cole's shoulder ran hot and down his sleeve. He felt the coat stick and unstick as the wound pulsed. He breathed through teeth and tasted iron. He eased the hammer back and let it down gentle with his thumb until the cylinder rested quiet. He put the pistol on the bar where he could reach it in a blink. He lifted the lighter with his left hand and slid it into his coat like a stamp going home. May moved past Crane where he lay and watched the chest try to make a case. The cigar smoke wrote lazy words in the air that did not mean anything. She crouched and did not touch him. She looked him in the eyes so he would have to see another person for once. Crane's lips formed a shape as if a number wanted out. Nothing came. His head rolled a fraction. The floor took him to the Anglewood Likes. May stood and went up the stairs without haste. The men at the rail stepped aside as if she were the sheriff and this was a parade. The upstairs landing had a peg where a strip of cloth hung. She reached for it like a woman lifts a baby from a cradle and does not wake him. The cloth came into her hand with a soft rasp. The scorched edge showed where it had licked flame. She folded it once and twice. She did not hold it to her face, though she could smell the old night baked into it. She came down the stairs and crossed the room, the same way she had gone up. Cole watched her come. His arm throbbed and found a steady thud. He pressed his palm to the wound and felt the heat that meant trouble later. He took the cloth from May with care. He knew what it could be for a person to see something that had touched a burn and had kept the shape of it. He did not say any word that belonged in a church. He slipped the shawl inside his coat, against the unhurt side where it would not touch blood. Bell found his voice. "You shot a man in my town," he said. It was not a charge. It was a fact that did not yet know what to do with itself. Cole did not look at him. He burned a house, Cole said. Your star saw it. Bell looked at the dented tin near his boot. He looked at May. May looked at him until his eyes flinched. He picked up the star and turned it in his hand, and then set it on the table without pinning it back on. He took a breath that had to fight to get in. He did not stand, not yet. A bottle on the back bar chose that moment to slip its balance and roll. May caught it with one hand, quiet. She put it back in its place and pressed the glass into wood as if to teach it to stay. Jeb coughed once like a bad joke. It ended. The upstairs stayed empty of more men. Those who had been in the room found doors in their heads and went through them without moving their feet. The piano had nothing to say. The floor smelled of smoke and powder and the wet copper of blood. Cole took the bandana from his pocket and tied it around his shoulder at an angle he could manage. His left fingers were clumsy. May came around and set the knot where it would hold. She drew it tight and he did not make a sound. She stepped back and looked at his face to see if the color had gone or stayed. It stayed. Water, she said. He nodded. She poured from the pitcher into the tin mug and he drank, and the water made the taste of metal let go. He set the mug down where it had sat before. The shard still leaned at its angle. In it, he saw the landing post and the place where Jeb had stood. He saw a small smear on the wood that would take a brush to lose. He folded the cloth over the shard and put both away. Crane let out a breath that made bubbles. It was soft and was gone. His hand slid along the floor until it found the cigar. He put 2 fingers on it and tried to lift. It rolled from his fingertips and came to rest by a scuff he had left earlier. His hand stilled. Bell pushed himself up with his right arm and got to his knees and then found his way to his feet. He swayed and set his palm to the pillar until the room stopped tilting. He met Cole's eyes and held them as long as he could, then a little longer. "You have to leave," he said. It had no force. It was a line he was supposed to say, and he said it. Well, Cole said because that was true now, and the room was done with him. May walked to the doors and slid the bolt back. Sun pushed into the room and laid a pail on the sawdust. Dust rose and danced as if happy to see a reason. She looked at the bodies and did a small count with her mouth closed. She looked at Bell and then at Cole. "Go," she said. "The day has work." Cole took his hat from the bar and set it on his head. He gathered the pistol and spun the cylinder with his thumb to hear the click find each chamber. He holstered the gun. He looked once at Crane, not long. He put a hand on the bar in a way that was almost thanks and left it there a heartbeat. He turned and walked for the light. The doors gave and the street came back with its lack of promise. Horses stood with heads down. A boy across the way pressed his back to a post to stay out of sight and still see. The sky looked like something washed and hung to dry. Cole came down the steps one at a time. The wound pulled and he let it. At the rail, the horse lifted its head and pointed one ear. Cole set his palm to the neck, and the animal relaxed. He checked the knot and found it as he had left it. He put a hand on the pommel and waited until the world steadied. Blood had made its own map on his coat. He did not study it. Behind him, the saloon muttered in a low voice, the sound of a chair moving, the slight ring of metal on wood, May calling for a broom and a bucket without calling loud. Sheriff Bell telling a man to fetch the doctor without looking like he thought the doctor would fix much. Cole put his boot in the stirrup and swung up. The bandana pulled at his shoulder and held. He gathered the reins. The horse stepped out with the care of an animal that knows the place where loud things happen. The sun laid a strip of light down the center of the street, and the horse walked it like a tightrope, with no drop below. Cole did not look back. He felt the lighter rest against his heart. He felt the folded shawl warm where the coat kept it. He breathed once and gave the horse its head. The town did not stop him or call his name. The town let him go. He rode home with the light going thin and gold, the kind that makes dust look kind. The horse held a careful trot that spared his shoulder. The coat stuck where blood had dried and pulled again where it had not. The road narrowed to what hooves remember. Mesquite leaned inward and then let him through. When the gate showed the rope on it, made its round shadow on the post like a brand. Nora was already at the yard. The broom stood where she had left it. Her hands were empty. She took 2 steps toward the rail and stopped, as if some old law had told her where not to go. Her eyes went to the bandana dark on his sleeve, then to his face, then to the coat where a shape pressed at the side. He swung down slow. The ground rose to meet his boots and held them. He put a palm on the horse's neck and felt heat and the steady push of breath. He did not say a word yet. He slipped a hand inside the coat and brought the folded shawl out. The scorched edge showed a tongue of black that had lived in fire and not forgotten. He held it toward her. She took it with both hands. The cloth made a soft sound against her fingers. She lifted it and set her face near the fabric, not touching, just close enough to read it. Smoke that had slept in the threads woke and told its old dry story. Her shoulders dropped the smallest measure. She drew a long breath that made room in her ribs where there had been none. She breathed again. The second breath found its own path without asking. Her mouth opened like it might try to thank him. She let it close. She folded the shawl once, twice the way you fold something that has already been folded 100 times and still needs care. She held it to her chest. When she finally spoke, it was a whisper aimed at the space between them. "You did it." He shook his head, and the hat brim made a small arc. "I pulled the trigger," he said. The rest was already coming. The wind set the windmill turning once, and it clicked and then stopped. The smell on the yard was wet. Earth turned to a thin crust horsewood that had remembered rain and let it go. He walked to the rail as if his shoulder were not his. He loosened the cinch 2 holes, and the horse sighed through its nose. He took the bit out, and the animal worked its tongue like a child tasting a new word. Nora reached for the canteen and unscrewed the cap without looking down. She brought it to him and did not try to make him drink. He did. The water was warm from the day. He let it rest in his mouth before swallowing. The taste of iron faded to something like coin, and then to nothing at all. "You are bleeding," she said. He glanced at his sleeve as if she had told him the weather. He set the canteen on the rail. "In the house," he said. She went ahead and pushed the door open with a hand that had stopped shaking. The room took them in and kept steady. The stove had a small coal under its lid, a red eye that opened when air found it. She set a pot on and filled it half from the kettle and half from the bucket, then lifted the lid 2 fingers and fed the fire a split. The flame took, and the quiet changed by a hair. He sat at the table and pulled the coat off one arm, then the other. The bandana was wet at the knot. She cut it free with his boot knife and laid the cloth aside. She washed her hands in the basin and shook them dry. The skin around her rope marks had gone the color of old fruit. She brought a clean rag and pressed it against his shoulder. He let air slip between his teeth and let it stop there. "You got it clean," she said. "It went through," he said. "In and out. Lucky." She lifted the rag. The bleeding had slowed. She poured hot water into a bowl, touched her finger to it, and gave it another minute. She worked in quiet eyes on the work. The house gave them the small sounds of a place deciding to be easy. The wind moved under the door and raised the loose edge of a paper on the shelf. The silver cup ring from the morning had dried to a faint pale circle on the table, like a moon that had learned restraint. He reached into the coat again and brought out the brass lighter. It lay in his palm with the old shine of something that has always believed it will be handled. The letters still cut the light with pride. He held it up so she could see it. Her eyes touched it and then left it. She did not refuse it. She did not take it. He stood slow and square and crossed to the stove. He flipped the lid open with the back of his hand. Red breathed up. He set the lighter on the lip for 1 second like a last look, then tossed it in. The brass made a sound when it found heat. Flame licked along the lid and under the hinge. The letters glowed dull, then brighter. The room waited. The lighter went from bright to brighter and then to a softened shape. A small pop like a seed in a pan, and it sank under coal and did its last job. The smell it gave was a thin tang of hot metal gone quick. Nora held the shawl tighter, then let it rest on her lap. She watched the place in the fire where the lighter had slipped from sight. Her face did not change. Something in the set of her shoulders did. She reached across the table and took his sleeve and rolled it with care to keep from waking the wound. She wiped away what she could and left the rest for later. When she spoke again, her voice had found ground. "You came back." He nodded once. He did not ask for forgiveness or for words to set what could not be set. He let the nod be all it was. They ate small and plain because that was what the hour held. Bread warmed on the pan, beans that remembered salt. He drank coffee gone thick and dark and did not make a face. She sat in the chair by the door with the latch near her shoulder. The habit was still there, but it had lost an inch of edge. She looked out the window at the line of the fence and the gate. The rope held its bowline neat and faithful. The knot sat like a thought you can trust. He saw her see it. He said nothing. He took the blue enamel cup and set it on the post by the window, as if to tell the room it was evening. The cup caught a last cut of light and gave it back. The worst of the pain receded to a throb that could be counted. He tied a fresh bandana not too tight. She checked the knot with her eyes, not her hands, and found it sound. She stood and went to the stove and lifted the lid to settle the split. The coal glowed and drew breath. The face of the fire looked like a thing that had decided what kind of light to be. In the quiet that followed the yard, sent in the smell of creosote rinsed by rain and dried by sun. The smell made her mouth firm. She put her palm flat on the table, as if to steady someone else, and then took it away. She unfolded the shawl and laid it out. Its pattern was simple, a border that had once been white, a center that had always been plain. She smoothed it with her hand, and folded it again, and set it on the shelf by the door high enough that a careless hand would not find it. He looked at it there. He looked at her wrists where the bruising had turned a softer color. In the side of the stove, a sliver of brass showed for a moment, and then was gone, eaten by heat. He blinked slow, the kind of blink a body uses to stay. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not asking." He gave her a look that admitted the truth without naming it. He put the pot back on the hook and left the lid a finger open. The room took the last of the day and put it in the corners for later. The windmill turned twice and gave up. A coyote far out made one statement and let it die. The horse dragged a hoof and settled. Nora set a clean cup on the post outside and filled it half with water. Frost would come, but not yet. She came back in and barred the door with a piece of wood that knew the notch it belonged in. The latch clicked honest. She touched the knot on the bar as if to greet a friend. He went to the window and looked out at the gate. The rope held the line snug and true. The shadow of the post fell across the packed earth like a black stripe you could stand on. He watched it until the stripe became the ground. He turned back to the room. The stove made a soft crack when a sap pocket found heat. Embers winked low and generous. She sat, not on the edge, but in the chair, as if it could carry her without complaint. He took the other chair and set his boots flat. The light in the room was the kind that makes walls less sure of where they end. They did not try to name what had changed. They let the house learn it. The fire settled. The night came in close and stayed there. The air was clear and the kind that makes breathing feel like work done right. She drew a deep breath, slow and full, and the room took it and held it safe. He answered with one of his own. Between them, the space did its small, quiet job. Outside, the gate stood. Inside, the shawl waited on its shelf. The lighter was gone. The stove kept what mattered. The days gathered and learned one another. Morning came thin and cool, then warmer, then with a bite again. The yard changed by inches that did not brag. The windmill found a steadier turn. The horse shed hair and grew shine. The fence line, once a shrug, stood up straighter board by board. Cole set the blue enamel cup on the end post each dawn. Steam rose and went clear. The cup caught the light and threw it back to no one in particular. He walked the line with a hammer and a coil of wire. Nora moved behind him with a pail and a cloth picking nails, carrying weight at the pace a body can keep all day. She had learned where the ground gives under boot. She had learned which boards complain and which accept. She did not sit with her back to the door anymore. She did not turn the chair, not every time. She kept the latch in her eye until she forgot, and then remembered and did not scold herself for either. He taught her the gate in the way a hand teaches a hand. They stood at the bowline that kept the opening from forgetting itself. He loosened it, let her see the path the rope takes, then set it again so it held. He spoke the words he had said before, but slower. Bowline. Holds under pull. Let's go when told. He placed the line in her fingers and stepped back. She made a loop wrong at first in the way anyone would. The rope pinched and argued. She undid it, set her thumbs lower and tried again. The line came through and around and back. The knot drew down neat and square. She pulled in 3 directions and the bowline understood. She did not smile. She looked at it like a person might look at a name spelled right after a long time of hearing it wrong. Good, he said. They worked the yard in quiet most days. When a steer found luck in a shallow hole and twisted its ankle, they eased it back to firm ground with soft words and a rope that did not scar. When loose shingles threatened to leave, he held the ladder, and she climbed, passing nails from her shirt pocket. Dust coated her hair. She did not shake it out until the hammer had done its last tap. When a thunderhead stood on the far ridge one evening and showed off, they watched from the porch and said nothing about whether it would come or go. At the shed, the flyer for Crane Consolidated curled more at the edges. The scorch mark at the corner had started to feather. Nora passed it without putting her fingers to it. She put her palm flat on the door jamb instead and felt the warmth the sun leaves in wood. She did not glance over her shoulder to see if anyone watched her do it. The shawl with the burned edge lived on the high shelf by the door. Sometimes she touched the shelf, not the cloth. Sometimes she took it down, folded it thinner, and set it back in a different way, as if the house needed to know where it was. The brass lighter had finished its last job. When they emptied ash, there was a curl of metal that had been a hinge, and nothing else anyone could name. Cole flicked it into the bucket with a fingertip, and forgot to look where it landed. The harmonica rode in the pocket of her coat, then on the table, then inside the top drawer of the cupboard. She took it up from time to time, turned it over, listened to the tiny river of breath that ran through it when she moved it near her mouth, and blew without wanting sound. She kept whatever notes might exist for some other hour. A rider came once along the road and slowed at the gate to ask for water. His horse lashed flies with a tired tail. He saw the rope and the knot and said, "You keep a true line here." Cole nodded. The man drank, tipped his hat, and said the town was quieter since a funeral no one dressed for. He said the sheriff had been seen with his hat low and his voice lower. He said the blue coyote had scrubbed its floor until the sawdust shone. He did not ask questions. He rode on. Dust rose, hung, and fell without a story to hang on. On a Sunday that no one named Cole pulled the windmill head down with a length of line and a prayer of leverage. The vanes had loosened and argued with the breeze. He set the bolts to right and oiled the bearings until the squeak fell to a hum. Nora stood at the base and kept the rope where it would not bite. Oil marked her fingers in half moons. She wiped them on a rag and left the rag on a nail. Days later she found it there and knew it had been her hand that set it. The knowledge sat in her chest like a small useful stone. They learned each other's footfall without trying. He knew when her steps slowed because the broom had found a snag. She knew when his steps paused because he had seen a thing he needed to fix, even if it could wait. In the evenings, he sometimes put the silver dollar on the post and watched the sky swallow it. He never forgot to take it back, but once he left it through dark and did not remember until morning. It was still there, pale with dew, and he wiped it on his shirt and returned it to his pocket like a habit that does no harm. They spoke a little. Work made most of their language. She said, "That post leans toward the road." He said, "We will brace it from the inside." She said, "The coffee tastes like the pan." He said, "That is because I cook like a man who forgets to be careful." Then he set the kettle to boil clean water and poured the first brew to the dirt like an apology. When the wind came at night, with the metallic scent of creosote, she still paused. She still listened for footsteps that did not exist. The pause grew shorter. The breath after it grew without catching. Once near dark, she walked to the gate and loosened the bowline just to set it again. She did it with nothing to chase away. Cole watched from the porch and kept still so she could feel the knot in her fingers and knot under his eyes. A fox crossed the far end of the yard one morning, red as a wound and neat as a word. It did not look at them. It lifted each foot and set it down in the same place the last foot had set. It vanished in mesquite and left only the idea of itself. She laughed without sound. The sound that would have been laughter lived in the look she gave the fence and the cup on the post and the way she breathed through her nose. The marks on her wrists faded from purple to yellow to a new color that had more skin in it than bruise. She rubbed salve into them mornings and nights. He did not offer his opinion on whether it helped. He filled the basin and left the towel on the table edge where her hand found it without looking. Toward late afternoon, on a day that had sweated its heat into the roof, Cole brought out a short length of rope, cut clean from a coil. He set it on the table and pulled 2 chairs close and placed the rope in her lap. "Say it," he said. "Bowline," she said. He nodded at the rope. "Make it blind." She closed her eyes. Her hands went to the line and learned its feel again, the stiff lay the way the fibers bite. Her thumbs found the place to make the bite. The tail came through and around and back. She drew it tight and opened her eyes. The knot sat ready. He took the line, twisted it in a way that makes poor sense the first time, and handed it back without comment. She worked at it longer. The knot came to heal anyway. He did not praise. He did not need to. She set the rope on the table like a thing that did what it should and did not ask to be thanked. They took coffee to the fence at dusk. The sky went the color of a peach left on the table too long. Shadows lengthened and cooled what they touched. The horse wandered near and stood with his head over the top rail as if he cared to be part of it. Cole's shoulder ached if he did not sit square. He sat square. The bandana beneath his shirt had been washed and hung and smelled faintly of sun. She said, "I used to think freedom was a room with no doors." He drank and set his cup on his knee. He looked at the knot on the gate and how true it lay. He looked at her hands at the place where rope had bitten and where new skin had grown shy over old hurt. "Maybe it is a rope," he said. "Maybe it is a thing you tie so it holds and untie when you tell it to." She breathed through her mouth, a slow draft that did not tremble. She looked at the cup on the post. She looked at the line of fence. The first star showed and did not ask permission. She reached into her pocket and brought out the harmonica and turned it in her fingers. She did not raise it to her lips. She put it away again with the small click of a thing choosing its time. Night folded itself in. He stood and took the cup and rinsed it with a splash from the canteen and set it upside down on the post to dry. She barred the door with the wood that knew its notch, and then lifted it and set it back as if to be sure. The house answered by keeping what they left inside and keeping out what should stay out. He checked the windows. She checked the stove. The coal still held a low, friendly light. He put a split in and closed the lid and left it a finger open. The flame changed its sound and settled to the kind of burn that lets a house sleep. She drew the blanket from the trunk and folded it once over the foot of the bed and left it there, like insurance, not a shield. They sat a while on the porch, with their boots on the step. The wind came and went. Prairie night has its own voice when it remembers to be kind. He could smell dry earth, give up heat. She could smell wood, give up the last of the day's smoke. They said little. He pointed once at the sky where a bat wrote its own grammar. She nodded at it, as if it had made a fair point. Inside, the table held a coil of rope that waited to be used. The bowline on the gate held. The blue cup dried with its handle to the yard. The shawl on the high shelf did not move. The lighter was gone to the ash. They let this be their arrangement without calling it that. The house took it and learned the weight. When they stood to go, when the porch gave a small pop at a nail head that needed setting, Cole felt it and marked it in his mind. Nora put her hand on the door and felt the latch give. The click was clean. The room accepted them. The quiet felt earned because it had been worked for, because it fit, because it held. Late light poured thin across the yard. The wind sloped down from the flats and brushed the wire like a hand that knows the way. Cole set the hammer back on its nail, palmed the post he had braced, and felt it hold. The horse shook flies from its withers and gave a low, satisfied snort. From the kitchen window, the blue enamel cup showed a lip of coffee gone cold. Nora came out with a bucket and poured a careful arc along the step to settle the dust. The water darkened wood and then disappeared. She paused at the gate and checked the bowline by touch eyes on the horizon where the land folded into itself. The knot had the right shape. The rope lay flat. She tugged twice. It answered with quiet confidence. They ate on the porch with plates on their knees, bread warmed at the stove, a heel of cheese, coffee fresh enough to forgive the bitterness. Cole kept his bad shoulder square and easy. Nora sat with her boots lined to the step and her coat unbuttoned at the throat. Evening came in pieces. The first cricket, the first star, the soft grind of the windmill finding a rhythm and letting it go. He reached into his pocket and set the silver dollar on the rail. It caught the low sun and threw a dull sun of its own. Nora watched the circle of light wobble on the wood and then steady. She did not ask why he did it. He did not say. He left the coin there and forgot about it the way a man forgets a nail in a wall that holds without complaint. When the plates were clean and the light thinned to the pale after gold, she stood and took the broom inside. He stayed. The day had used him but not emptied him. He listened to the yard talk to itself. A fox stepped along the fence line without hurry. The animal paused at the corner post and looked once toward the house, as if checking a name it would not call out. Then it slipped into the mesquite and became suggestion. Inside the stove gave a shimmer of heat you could see in the air if you looked above the lid. Nora set 2 splits aside, not heavy, not hard, the kind of wood that takes a coal without argument. She wiped the table and put the tin plates on the shelf with the small chips at the back. The shawl sat on the high shelf like a folded thought. She touched the edge with one finger and felt no ash come away. She left it where it was. Cole came in and hung his hat on the peg that fit it best. He opened the stove and leaned over the small red at the heart. The base coals winked back. He fed them a split and left the lid a finger short of closed. Flame moved along the edge with calm purpose. The room answered by breathing warmer. Nora took the wash basin to the pump. He followed with the bucket. Water came with a complaint, and then it baked a steady run cold enough to sting. She washed her hands to the wrist and turned them to the lamp to check what the day had left. The bruising at her rope marks had nearly fallen back to skin. He watched the water run off her fingers and away into ground that kept all such small things without report. He set the coin on the table and put the lamp behind it. The coin made a soft ring when it met wood. He adjusted the wick until the flame held without smoke. The glass of the chimney showed the faintest breath of soot where the day's dust had chosen to settle. He thought about wiping it and did not. She looked at the coin, and then at him, and then at the door latch. Her mouth made the shape of a yes, and then let it go. He said, "You want the chair by the window." She said, "I will take the other." They sat with the gate in one sight line and the stove in the other. The house carried their breath without noticing. She reached into the pocket of her coat and found the harmonica. She turned it in her hands and let the metal learn her warmth. She lifted it to her mouth and waited. Her eyes went to the knot on the bar. The wood there had taken the shape of her hand from many small touches. She looked away from it and put the harmonica to her lips. The first note was thin and shook. The second found a center. She drew and blew a simple line, the kind a person might hum to keep a memory from slipping out the back of the mind. The tune did not belong to church or saloon. It belonged to someone who had learned where to breathe. Cole held still, not to trap it, only to let it live. The notes found the edges of the room and softened them. They climbed to the rafters and sat light as dust on a beam. She stopped, without finishing anything. The quiet after the last note had a shape that felt useful. She set the harmonica on the table and left it near the coin metal beside metal dull shine. He said, "Sounds right." Her eyes stayed on the gate. Then she looked at him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For leaving me space. For not filling it up with your wants." He nodded. His hand went to the bandana under his shirt where the wound had knit itself into something he could forget for minutes at a time. He did not say he had wanted things and not taken them. He did not say he had taken some and left others. He looked at the rope marks on her wrists and saw the new skin set neat where trouble had been. That was enough to hold. Night took the yard. Wind slowed. The windmill rested. The horse slept on its feet, hip-cocked. In the house, the lamp gave a circle of light without edges. Nora stood and crossed to the door and slid the bar down into its notch. The click was honest. She checked the window by laying her palm to the sash, not to test, only to say hello. She came back and sat again with her shoulders lower than they used to sit. He poured a little coffee, dark and quick, and drank it without making a face. He took the silver dollar and flipped it once in his palm and let it fall to the table. It did not ring this time. The wood caught it like an old friend. He slid it under the short table leg and the wobble went away. He smiled in his eyes and nowhere else. The stove settled. A small pocket in the split snapped, and the ember showed for a breath and then withdrew. Nora watched the place where it had been and saw nothing that asked to be fixed. She took the harmonica again, not to play, only to hold. She spoke toward the window. "I do not think about the road as much." He followed her eyes to the gate. The rope lay clean. The knot kept its shape. He said, "It is still there." "I know," she said. Her hand turned the harmonica so the lamplight made a faint mark along its side. "I like that it is there." He breathed slow and regular. The chair held his weight and asked for nothing. At the edge of hearing, coyotes marked the distance. The sound reached them thin and softer than it used to be. He stood and lifted the lamp and turned the wick down. The flame shrank and held. Orange from the stove took the work of light. It painted knuckles and the rim of the cup and the iron hoop on the bucket. It did not touch the high shelf. It did not need to. She watched him set the lamp aside and come back with the lantern glow on his hands. He took his chair. Their shoulders found the easy closeness they had earned. She said, "You do not need anything from me." "I need the morning," he said. "I need the fence to stand. I need the wind to move the pump." He looked at her steady. "I need you to be all right." Her eyes did not drop. She nodded once. She put the harmonica on the table and left her hand beside it. The curve of her fingers made a small shelter. He set his palm near, close enough for warmth to travel, not enough to press. The space between them had its own job and did it. Outside, a small thing rustled in the mesquite and stopped. The fox returned and crossed the yard with the care of a creature that knows when it is seen and does not mind. The gate did not move. The bowline kept its line. The horse snored, a brief, surprised sound that made them both smile without showing it. When sleep asked for them, they did not refuse. He banked the stove with practiced care until the embers glowed low and sure. She drew the blanket to the foot of the bed and left it folded. The coat hung on its peg. The shawl did not shift on its shelf. The coin kept the table true. The harmonica lay where she had placed it. They put out the lamp. Dark came up gentle. Breath settled. The house knew the weight of two people and liked it. The little sounds of settling wood rose and fell. The wind put a finger against the window and then took it away. In the yard, the knot tied by her hands held. In the stove, the ember fed by his kept its quiet light. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.